So we proceed to item 5, public input. 3 requests have been made of me and the committee to be heard, and they are the Herne Bay Residents Association to discuss residential developments encroaching on there's also the Herne Bay Residents Association on helicopter noise and some other matters. Now, they are 2 different presenters from the same organisation, and the third presentation is again on helicopter noise and associated environmental effects, and that's from an individual, and that's Eleanor Keith. And members, there are a number of presentations that you can see on Nexus, if you have not already noticed. So there's a presentation from Don Matheson, Dirk Huddig, and Eleanor Keith on Nexus for you to follow. We'll now go to Don. I think you're with us already.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Got a delightful background there, Don. I can only imagine that's what you're going to be talking about.
Yes, that's correct.
And Don, I'll hand to you, and you've got 5 minutes for your presentation and questions. In your good hands, Don.
Thank you very much. I'll just try and share my screen here. So you should be able to see a PowerPoint.
We can.
Is that correct?
It's with us now.
Right, so this is Herne Bay Beach. It's one of several beaches along that little north-facing peninsula. For a few years ago, and you can see people are enjoying the beach. So what sort of raised our attention to this was as a resource consent application from 67 Argyle Street, which has riparian rights down to that beach, based on a survey of the mean high water springs, which was done in 1891. The sanding of the Herne Bay beaches formed a part of a wider project to resand Mission Bay and other bays all around Auckland after storm sand on some beaches that had never had sand. So they did Herne Bay, Sentinel, and some Hamilton Road beaches. I believe it was a part of a project of 7.74 million paid for by the council, which I believe that's for the whole project. With the original meeting minutes and so on as to the reasons why they were sanding the beach. And the rationale was to provide the amenity of an all-tide dry beach for recreation purposes. If you look at the picture, you can see that people are bathing or sunbathing on the dry area of the beach. So they wanted to make that available to the public, which, given the sea levels at the time, at tides. So the report shows that by putting a certain amount of sand on the beach, they are going to be able to raise the beach level by 0.6 to 0.8 metres. And that's all the way along the shoreline, and the minutes of the meeting state that this is a cut out from 8 metres increase in elevation along the shoreline, and they thought that would be sufficient to maintain a dry beach for the majority of tidal conditions, assuming a uniform 5 metre wide beach crest. The sand volume required would be required, although that's a relatively narrow beach. The adjacent reserve is relatively open with trees and seating. There's a toilet block situated at the base, and the beach would provide an all-tide dry beach for passive recreation and protect the existing seawalls and currently unprotected areas of the bay. So for the protection of the seawalls and the provision of a dry area for the public amenity. 67 Argyle Street to build a boathouse on the beach, on an area which has been sanded by the council. The application boundary for the building is based on the mean high water springs, and that has moved. We will that it might have moved from the original survey because of the additional height of the sand. And so that means that if you have a look in this diagram here, I don't know if you can see the mouse moving, but the red mark is a very little primitive mark that I've put roughly indicating where the original 18 whatever. And I've just quickly overlaid a diagram of the beach house as it's been submitted over the top of that, and you can see it extends quite a lot into the actual public area of the beach. We're concerned riparian rights along the beach is areas that have been resanded. So this is one part of it, but we believe the impact would be much greater in other parts. But it raises a big question: is that was this? We're presuming this sanding the beach that the property owners would get larger properties. So we're concerned that it could be done all the way along the beach and make those extra parts of the beach effectively privately owned. So here's an example of the where the sanding has occurred, and you can see there's quite a lot of erosion on the tree, and the sand is protecting the tree. The sanding is protecting the tree. The application's based on the mean high water having moved by council sanding. I've said. So what we'd like to know is, does the changing of the mean high water springs mark provide extra land for the applicant? And does the fact that the mean high water springs mark was changed by a man-made action change this? And does the fact that the boundary the owner from seeking additional land because the mean high water springs has changed? There may be other legal issues, such as perhaps the use of council-owned sand. I'm not a lawyer, but there may be other issues. There's one there. So what we're really asking is, before a decision is made, to avoid this and larger portions of the dry beach area being privatised. You can see here on their application, they've noted that they believe, because they haven't fully defined where they believe that the litter line on the beach becomes the new mean high water springs mark. So on this diagram or photo here, I've marked where the litter line is, and you can see all the people effectively bathing on areas which could be built on by people extending their boat sheds. So here along the beach there's quite a few boat sheds like this, and you can see that if each one of them was to extend out to where they're 0.8 metres below, they could extend their boat shed out quite a lot. And this is direction. You can see a seawall that's been built to protect the banks, and owners of property on what's currently public land, but may be defined. This is just a plan that was submitted with the application. Note in here that the mean high water springs boundary is approximately determined it in what would sound to me to be a legal manner. They've really just interpreted what information that they have, and this is where we think that there should be some some investigation. So you can see here that I think the original line is this little blue. Where is it? It's a bit tricky because of the colours, but anyway, that plan is available if anyone wants to have a look at it. So yeah, that's the end of my slideshow.
Thanks, Don. Now, I just need to check the status of this application. Now, Megan is with us. Megan, before we delve into questions, I just need to check the status of this application. If we're in a regulatory process, I just need to caution members. So, Megan, do you know the status of this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, to be honest, I don't know the exact nature of it or status. I do believe it has not yet, the decision has not yet been made on it. That's probably all I know. I'm happy to try and get some information quickly for you now, but I think you're absolutely right in the sense that this is ultimately a matter of resource consent application, and it's not something that the Planning Committee can kind of decide on or direct appropriately at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. So, members, if we could just be mindful that there is a process that's underway under the RMA that is treating with this. Can I just come back to you, Don? This evidence you have, this information, have you had it checked by the association's legal representative or your planning expert? And have you submitted so to the process?
We have made some email submissions to the planner involved who sent us the information which I presented to you. All those plans come from the actual application. We do believe, however, that at this minute the application is on hold. Is that right, Dirk? Nod your head if I'm correct.
It's an affirmative from Dirk. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. It's on hold at the moment. Look, I'll take questions, Don, and thank you for this information. We'll make sure this information does go through to the respective teams and be mindful that there is a regulatory process underway.
Sure. First, interfere with the process that's underway. But my question goes like this. There are quite a number of areas applies. I'd suggest that there's a general lack of awareness on the part of the community around the process of arriving at mean high water springs, and that's on the basis of a similar issue that I faced on the. So my question goes to officers, and that is around pulling something together that describes the process, sets it in some context, particularly as it goes to sea level rise and storm surge, coastal area. And I'm mindful that our process of climate change adaptation as it goes to the coastline is still in an early phase. The first compartment was whangapraoa that I'm certainly familiar with. So is available to the community at large at this point, and given that I would suggest there's some urgency around this issue, how quickly can we pull something together, Mr. Chair?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll go to the Director of Strategy. Megan, are you able to address that, please?
Springs is a measurement in an area that is constantly moving, and I don't mean to say that in a pun, but obviously it's a natural environment, and so there are a number of different ways to measure mean high water springs, and certainly in the unitary plan or take a view that there is, at the very least, matters of average tidal heights and things like that to be considered. The Ministry for the Environment and Land Information New Zealand has also got advice on this matter. So look, it's not an easy one to just have a black and white definition, or perhaps even way of measuring. However, both this council and other councils in New Zealand have been needing to deal with this for some time, and so that is the purpose of the consenting process in particular, to consider the most appropriate way of determining mean high water springs. Of course, the other really important correlation here is to the site boundary, and some of the very old property boundaries go right into the sea, or even, you know, to mean high water springs. Others are much further away. So there is that correlation about whether I believe there is any work that staff could do to try and clarify this. I hesitate to say I don't really think there is. This is just a natural need for us to look at the environments these things sit in. There is. I don't really think there's anything more we can clarify. Unfortunately, we will use the resource consent application process to make those kind of determinations.
Thank you, Megan. Councillor Walker, did you have a second question?
Sure. I've had some direct experience of this in the past, and there are ways to actually and the like.
I really need a question, please, Councillor.
So my question is it possible to have some guidance for people in the community work? Because there are significant resources as a community available, but that need to have some advice as to how to go about it. So I just put that question to you.
Now, Megan, I think you may have addressed that question. You're saying that the information is available. Do you just want to reiterate those points again, please?
Yes, so in the definition in the unitary plan of mean high water springs, there is a measurement there. It also references Ministry for the Environment and Land Information New Zealand, and there are some additional methods of measurement. But again, all I say about, and also the natural environment in which any kind of application or development occurs. And so that's where there is absolutely advice there, but that is where an application process is the best way to work through what that might look like at any particular point in time.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
No, I need Councillor Fletcher, and then we will go to the next presentation. Councillor Coombe, please.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair, e mihi ana ki a koutou. Kia ora, Don, and thank you for that presentation and all that research. As always, you've really got a lot of evidence put together there. My question is really by way of an update, just to confirm we're all on the same page, because I think is that it was lodged but placed on immediate suspension by the applicant, and so as a result no further work was being undertaken by council, so they're just sitting on the application. But once it comes off suspension, and this update was in October, which is the applicant's control, then a full analysis will be undertaken by relevant experts that will include consideration of any recent correspondence. So I think that's kind of the answer to the question about how this is going to be evaluated, and this might be an opportunity. I know you just had just to clarify what your concern is. Also, just to note that the local board has given input asking that the application, the site visit, and your analysis. So thank you for that. But I just wondered, through you, Mr. Chair, whether Don just wants to clarify that we're all on the same page about the status of the application, and just to confirm exactly what the issue is. I know that Don's put that in the sidebar, but perhaps just to Do you want to respond, Don?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Don, I
yeah.
will go to you. So we don't have anybody from regulatory with us. I'm sure Councillor Cooper doesn't even know the status of these things. So look, we'll take it from you, Don, because you've been asked to respond, but it's not the council. We can't give a council confirmation of it because we just don't.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've given the update on where it's at. We don't need that further clarification.
Need that not from an elected member because you could be incorrect, and this is dangerous when elected members hold out, the council point of view. Now, you may have an email that you're reading from, but that's where we do rely on the regulatory staff, and they're not on this call. So, Don, what's your take on it?
Our concern really is not really with identifying where mean high water springs is. It's whether or not a private landowner can take advantage of the extra sand that's been put on the because as an unintended consequence lowers the mean high water springs and theoretically increases the area of their property. That's our issue is protecting the investment that the council's made and the amenity that's been created by the council's investment in the sand. We don't believe it should be used then for members of the property owners or to extend their
Clarification. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Kia ora, Mr. Matheson. To a degree, Councillor Coombs, I was going to ask you to make clear your point of where your concern is. But what I note and what I'd be curious to know from you is that any kind of legal advocacy incredibly difficult and expensive, and this just doesn't relate to your area. David and Goliath spring to mind, but I would be curious to know just how, as an organisation, what's entailed in terms of fundraising, the advocacy to protect the public good, because it's not just the Herne Bay residents that use these beaches. It's the one on how difficult it is to be a champion and advocate, if you like, in terms of the protection of the public good.
It's very difficult. Everybody that we talk to is always outraged by these things, but when it comes to them providing some funding, it's very difficult to get. To use the legal means that are available, rather than, that's our approach, rather than protesting or being general PIAs. So it costs a lot of money. If we wanted to get an opinion from a surveyor, probably cost us 10 grand. And if we were to raise a court, some kind of court action, it would be another 10, 20, 30,000. The boat shed down the road that wanted the helicopter were over 100,000. And you enter into these things not knowing if you're going to win or lose. It's winner takes all. It's a high court action. It's very difficult, and we'd like some method that was a little bit more grassroots at the planning department at the council, that they could look at these things before they become a fait accompli and then require huge amounts of money to.
It's very helpful. So what you're bringing to us today is that you don't want to see advantage being taken by the sanding, but also you're wanting council to be somewhat more proactive because of the cost to your community by constantly having to be vigilant on these sorts of issues. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just really trying to understand the message you
appreciate if there was something that could prevent the sort of rearguard action that we have to follow up on, which by the time we can, it's very expensive and favoured in the applicant, because it's a problem for the council after something's been issued and want the council to sort it. The council's got a three-way fight with us, if you consider us opponents, or maybe we're on your side, but then you've got the applicant who's disgruntled that they may lose their consent. And well, who's got the most amount of money here? And it's the applicant. And so they'll possibly maybe take the easier way out and just sit with the applicant, because they put up.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you for your advice.
The screen there, Megan. This will be referred to both plans of places and regulatory. Can you just give me some feedback on how you take this information?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, look, happy to do so. Obviously, we will refer it to both the policy side and the consenting side, but knowing, of course, the consent process will go through. Mr. Matheson knows, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, we have the motion on the screen there. Can I have a mover, please? In a second. Okay, I'll move.
I'd like to second. Thank you.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no.
Aye.
Declare that carried. Thank you, Don. And now we go to Dirk Hudig, and Dirk's also from the Herne Bay Residents Association, and we're coming off the beach with helicopters. So Dirk, 5 minutes for your presentation and questions. In your hands, Dirk. Still muted. We've still got you muted. If you're on Teams, if you go to the top right, and you'll see the red leave symbol, and go 2 to the left of that. Top right.
Thank you very much. Sandra, if we could go to page 2 of the presentation, please. Thank you. I'll just read this out, and then I'll make some comments on this page, and then the same for the next page. Centred with only very limited notification. We at Herne Bay Residents Association received more complaints about helicopters than any other issue. In fact, more than all other issues combined. Under the unitary applications are made under the noise issues in the New Zealand standards for noise and vibration, and the unitary plan. Helicopter noise is highly intrusive. The immediate neighbours are generally asked to sign off on excessive noise, yet people further away tell us they can't talk on the phone or carry on a conversation during the landing and takeoff manoeuvres. We do not consider this to be an issue of being less than minor. The noise impacts on quiet enjoyment. This noise impacts on. And then there is a cumulative effect of increasing movement numbers causing more noise. This does not seem to be a relevant issue in assessing helicopter applications. Heliport applications, it should be a relevant consideration for consents. And just to give you an idea of what happens, let's say Herne Bay has 5 heliports, and it's only. And most of these are given about 12 flights per week, and no more than 3 per day. Now, so on any given day, if you do 3, that's 3 landings and 3 takeoffs. So it's actually 6 movements. So you could get 30 separate movements per day from just these 5 heliports. And that's highly intrusive for many in the vicinity. And during each of those movements. If we can now go to the second page, or third page, that would be appreciated, Sandra. There is an obsession with noise in the environmental effects reports. In 2 of the 3 heliport consents that exist in Herne Bay, in 2 cases there were no other effects that were not mentioned and not even considered. The heliport on Sentinel Point means helicopters fly over a public walkway and parts of the point. This area is popular for sunbathers and swimmers, and it's been known that towels and clothing have been uplifted in propeller wash, and some have ended up in the sea. In the case of the heliport at higher tides and affects at least one neighbouring property where there have been complaints made. In the case of another heliport situated immediately next to the Cremorne Reserve, the AEE report with an application to substantially increase the number of flights makes no mention at all on the effects of the reserve, the beach, or the people using it. And the application is, we believe, currently on hold because a neighbour won't sign. Now, I'd just like to elaborate a bit more on that particular aspect of matters. Section E25.2, and in brackets 1, it says that people should be protected from unreasonable levels of vibration, and sign-off is required for those from those where the noise level exceeds the maximum. And in the case of the reserve, there is, as I said, there'll be no mention really of any effects on the reserve. And bear in mind, there's people there, and we're trying to protect people from excessive noise. There's certainly people using that reserve. We know that because we've been there. There's a beach at the bottom of it. The heliport, the reserve, and then the neighbour. The neighbour has excess noise and is being asked to sign off, and but the reserve gathers no mention. So it's our view that the council is responsible for reserves and for the coastal marine zone, and really the council should be standing up for the rights of people who use these areas. And if the council doesn't take up this mantle, then no one else will, because there's no one else to do it. The next issue that is relevant is that in Cremorne Street there are 2 heliports, and about 8 apart. Now, if one can call it, the shadow of the noise shadow, actually overlap. So in some cases, people are affected by both heliports, but none have been asked to sign off in some of those cases because each separate application noted only the people who are affected by that particular application, so that the people who are actually under the shadow of both, in fact, may not have ever been required to sign off. Was higher than permitted normally in the unitary plan. If you can now go to the next page, please. Without change, the numbers of heliports will continue to increase, and so will the issues. We don't believe heliports are suitable for residential areas, not just because of noise, but also because of other often overlooked effects. We request that the Council amends the unitary plan to either ban heliports in residential areas or reduces the acceptable noise levels within the city limits for them. And we'd be happy to assist and be part of a group which re-looked at the heliport issues with a view to an appropriate plan change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dirk. We'll take questions now. Megan, do you at this stage want to give us an update? I'm aware that helicopter issues are being raised in Herne Bay and Waiheke, Megan, do you want to just give us an update on the memo, which I understand is coming to planning committee members possibly in the next couple of days in response to helicopter issues, and whether that memo is not just in Waiheke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just go back slightly, just a couple of years ago. So in 2019, the committee asked us to do some work around the unitary plan provisions and how it deals with helicopter use. And so we did provide work to that. The conclusions were that the unitary plan does adequately provide for the consideration of helicopters, understanding that the members here don't want helicopters to be considered in certain areas, so I completely understand that position. But in terms of our regulatory role and our advice to you, that there are of helicopters. However, it's a long-standing concern for a number of residents, whether it's in the islands or on the coast of the mainland. And so we, the Waiheke local board in particular, just recently have made some resolutions and have also going to circulate to the planning committee. I believe that is just a couple of days away. Unfortunately, we couldn't quite time it in time for this. I suspect, however, in terms of the members here this morning, it's not going to give them the answer they want in the sense of recommending banning or anything like that. But we consistently work with our regulatory counterparts in terms of the provisions of the plan and how that gets worked out in an application form. But as always, the resource consent application is a case-by-case assessment, and sometimes they're approved and sometimes they are not. So look, soon. However, I don't believe it's going to meet the needs of what you're hearing this morning in terms of a kind of a banning or more controls around these kinds of things. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Questions from members of the committee, please? Are there any? I can't quite see. How long does it take you to drive from Herne Bay to Mechanics Bay, a commercial heliport, or even the Rosedale heliport?
Well, Mechanics Bay, probably what, 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And Rosedale's probably maybe 15.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions there? Dirk, I think we've got this information. The councillors have read it prior to the meeting as well. You've presented well today. It is on our mind. I have raised this question of the activity status with both our Director of Strategy, Megan, who's just activity status for helicopter applications in residential zones is currently a non-complying activity. I've raised the question of whether that could possibly be a prohibited activity. But right now, I have to be really honest, our plans and places team, our strategy people are very, they are just socks worked off at the moment. And that has to be our priority. But look, we'll be issuing a memo very shortly to the planning committee and also the Waiheke local board. I think it's probably a couple of days away, and we'll association as well. Okay, I'll just do one last check. Thank you, Dirk. And
happy to second.
And okay, I've got a move. Is it from Councillor Fletcher? And Councillor Coombe is seconding the motion there. And again, that will be referred. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Dirk. Now we'll go to Eleanor Keith, also in her own right, actually, and this is on helicopter noise and associated environmental effects. So welcome, Eleanor.
for the warm welcome. Mayor Phil Goff, Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore, councillors, thank you for granting us the opportunity to speak. I'm a Westmere resident and I'm joined by Jeanette Budgett, who is actually going to speak on our behalf today. Jeanette.
Morning, everybody. I'm not quite sure who's controlling the images. Can you let me know whether it's you or me?
That's either in the hands of Sandra or Duncan. So once you see those images, just please speak as you would like, Jeanette. Just speak to the images as they pop up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, everybody, again. We're here to support the Quiet Sky Initiative on Waiheke and the Herne Bay Residents Association speakers who preceded us. Specifically, we're here to comment on the proliferation of helicopters. Interested in the potential impacts on Westmere Peninsula and the apparent absence of clear AUP policy, which you've discussed this morning. We're delighted to hear that there is another memo coming out soon. The issue's been well laid out. 48 helipads on Waiheke, 4, I beg your pardon, maybe only 3. See this as the beginning of a wave of applications all around the harbour, and have some grave concerns for that. Next image, please. You'll be well versed in the adverse effects of helicopter and noise impacts on immediate neighbours, and of course, because these are applications for residential sites, they spill into public space. Because they're mostly in the coastal zone, they spill into the harbour, and the protection of the harbour is another. We don't see the harbour as a kind of an extended bit of city infrastructure like a motorway. We don't want to see the harbour as an aerial highway, and we don't see mudflats as passive wastelands. You know, they are not the empty receiving environment that planners like to talk about. These adverse effects kind of generate bigger questions, which you as council, of course, are dealing with all the time. How do we continue to improve urban livability and protect the environment? What sort of city do we want to face, and what sort of city do we want, in fact, in the face of a couple of very significant dramas? Intensification, it's already been mentioned today. You can see that Cox's Bay and Westmere have been upzoned. The orange biscuity areas have been significantly upzoned. We are lucky, this part of Auckland that was constructed just a few years ago, thanks to a lot of council help. And it stretches from Motions Creek all the way around to Cox's Bay. It's a low tide walk in Cox's Bay. The impacts of intensity and this public amenity is significantly affected by helicopter use. Next slide, please. The other really big driver, of course, is climate change, which council is only too aware of. They've put out this terrific document, Auckland's Climate Plan. In that document, it's like fundamental shifts to how we power personal travel. So we really just want to pose the question, do helicopters stack up in terms of these values? And they're clearly far less efficient than other modes of transport. They've been likened to super racing cars, and they don't stack up, I'm afraid. Final image, please. So to return to the memo that Megan Taylor mentioned, Councillor Tyler mentioned earlier, the one that was sent out in July by Phil. Phil Reid said the crux of the issue is the use of helicopters for private transport within urban residential environments. The memo asks some really relevant questions. What is the policy intent of Auckland's unitary plan? And helipads in residential environments? And if not, how can this be addressed? We really just want to reiterate these questions. This is, as far as we know, the last action that was taken. We hear another memo is coming. We're delighted to hear that. We finally request and urge to examine best international practice. Sydney, San Francisco and Melbourne have all addressed helicopter use in their residential zones. We ask Council to consider appropriate non-residential locations for public heliports to meet what is clearly a growing public demand. We would ask Council to make helicopters for personal transport, ask them to require public notification for all applications. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jeanette and Eleanor. Now we will take some questions, Jeanette, for you, and Eleanor, starting with Councillor.
Tēnā kouroua, Jeanette and Elena. Thank you for coming along as well with Dirk to present on the helicopter issue. It might be useful through the chair just to confirm the latest action is more current than 2019 in terms of the presentation that we received in early August, and also the chair mentioned before around the memo that we're waiting on. But I just wondered if through you, Mr. Chair, we could just get an update from Megan about the current application in Westmere that has caused a lot of the concerns as well around the helicopter issue. That might be useful, but just thank you for your in terms of how the Wiona Westmere walkway was achieved, all through your efforts.
And
so
yours.
Thank you. So yeah, just that partai to Megan, just for
Megan, I'm not sure, are you in a position, have you checked with regulatory
update on
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, look, I'm sorry, I don't have a recent update. I'm happy to provide that to the committee, perhaps by email when I can do that, but I'm not in a position to be able to answer that right now.
Looks probably a couple of applications there.
It's just
we just have update on status on the two applications that have been referred to. This one, Rowaney, and the one earlier that Don was referring to. Okay. Other questions, members? Councillor Coombe, were there other questions from you?
Just that's in the process to decide whether it's going to be notified or not. That's just where it's at.
Yep. Yeah. Your audio's breaking up also, Councillor, but I think we got all of that. Okay. Are there other questions of Jeanette and her great presentation and issue, Jeanette and Eleanor? We're definitely thinking about it, and there are discussions, myself and others, with our Plans and Places team and Megan as our Chief of Strategy. So look, I can't say much more at the moment, but there will be your way as well.
Thank you.
Somebody like
Can
Sorry,
I just
Jenny.
ask one question? That memo
Yes.
is not for public release. It's a council document, or can it be shared with members or guests of this meeting?
No, it can be shared. Once it's not a confidential document. It comes to the planning committee for the members' information.
Yeah.
It will also go to the Waihi local board. In this instance, we'll probably make sure it goes through to the Waitemata local board as well, and we'll get a copy to Herne Residents Association and yourselves, representing more the Westmere residents.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Good. Can I have a mover, please, to receive this information and thank
I'd like to move. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Papacoom? Do I have a second, please? I'll second then, and we'll make sure again those presentations. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no, and declare that carried. So thank you both, all of Don, Dirk, Eleanor, Jeanette, for your tremendous work and the presentations, the time you put into those presentations, and your appearance here today in front of the planning committee. So very, very grateful. We'll move now past the public input to